This is Cold Start.
We like to get out on the road and drive our cars, go cool places, see cool things, and we thought we'd talk to you about what it's like to try to organize a group of friends together or a road rally, what we call driving in an organized group to get from place to place, maybe from waypoint to waypoint, maybe just to a destination, but there's certain techniques, there's approaches, there's things you can be keeping in mind before you ever get out on the road to ensure a good day out there, ensure your success, your safety, and make it the kind of event and experience that'll be memorable and something that you want to go back and do again.
And it's funny we talk about this because I feel like I'm the type of person that I'd rather hit the roads alone. So I don't have that much experience going on road rallies. I don't know why, but I always found driving to be more of a personal experience. I like my alone time out there on the road and, the way I wanted to drive, as long as I was doing so safely and alone. I didn't feel like I was going to be judged by anyone else. But I like this conversation. I like this concept of, yeah, we want to do it as a group. There's a community aspect, some camaraderie that goes into driving together and sharing that experience, right? I think the one thing that was the downside whenever I would go on drives alone is once you get to your destination, you're out there by yourself, right? Like you wanted to share that destination maybe with someone else. So I think it's a great thing to get into and a great conversation to have of how to do things correctly in driving as a group. Because, yeah, there's some energy you're going to play off other people. And how do you make sure that everyone has a good time?
Cars are a personal thing. We choose a car for our own reasons, the things that we like, our own preferences. We drive the way that we're comfortable. We go to the places we're interested in. But once in a while, it is fun. You have that camaraderie of a group of people. Maybe it's not a huge group. Maybe it's just 2, 3, 4 people getting together to do something together, a joint activity. Maybe it's about sharing experiences, the things that you do, the places you encounter, the journey itself becoming the destination, right? Being out there with a group of friends or people who are into some common thing. Maybe it's a certain kind of car. Maybe it's going to your particular destination. Being able to do that in such a way that it's organized and you can have a good time. Part of it's being outdoors. So much of our enjoyment of all the things that we like in life, cars being among them, we have sort of shifted to this indoors mindset. Like we go onto our computers or our phones or our devices to see what other people are out there in the world doing, where they're bringing their cars, where they're showcasing them, cool destinations, places to go visit or vacation. So this is a way to get back outside, get into the physical world, have a tangible experience doing something in your car with other people who are out there doing things in their cars. And then there's this dynamic of just having different cars together. Since cars are personal and maybe you make the choices about what you like and how to style your particular vehicle, getting to see how other people do that with theirs, having those together, it makes for a cool and dynamic experience, something that's going to be different than just you sitting in a parking lot looking at your car or a group of cars that are all like yours. Even if you go out driving with other cars like yours, you can appreciate the differences among those cars, the things people have done to make them uniquely their own individual vehicles, and then how they use them. And ultimately, it's more than just a way to get somewhere. Every day we're out on the roads, we commute to our jobs, our places where we live, wherever it is that we happen to be going. And to be able to do that with a group of other people, we've talked about before that aspect of a road trip where, yeah, you might just be going to do the same kinds of things you do at home, but doing it somewhere else with friends in a different environment somehow amplifies that, it embellishes it, it brings qualities to that experience that you can't just have sitting at home watching a video or trying to do it all by yourself. So we're being proponents of being social. Get out there, using your car in a social way with other people that is a constructive and a positive way, ultimately, is what we're talking about, to use your car and enjoy the experiences of taking your car to somewhere fun.
Yeah, there's a totally different element of spending a morning or an afternoon rather than just going to a Cars and Coffee and hanging out in a parking lot and just checking out everyone's cars to let's all get together and let's go for a drive for a handful of hours. Now, getting into the nitty and gritty, right? The details. What is going to make a good group drive versus a not so fun group drive? Todd, what are some of the key elements that you have to look into to make something like this successful?
Well, like anything, a little planning goes a long way. And we don't have to absolutely plan this thing out with military precision, like every waypoint along the journey or every, schedule down to the minute or anything like that. But
Yeah.
we set some guidelines in advance. We put some ground rules together. I think picking the route is the first and foremost thing. I've been on drives with a group of people that we didn't really have a destination in mind, and it was hard to keep the group organized. It was hard to know, are we done? People would peel off at different times. So just picking out a place to drive, places to go along the way that we can all agree upon. Maybe we have some goal or something we're trying to accomplish, or maybe those are just fun places to drive. So having there be some agreement about where it is we're going to go and what the nature of that place or places is or are.
Yeah, I mean, like, you got to have like a little bit of structure and framework to the situation. It can't just be a free for all. I mean, here in Northern California, right, you have too many options. There's too many good roads. Are you going to go inland? Are you going to go to Napa County, Sonoma County, coastline, up into the mountains? What are the sorts of vibes that you're trying to get? Now, I think like thinking about a route. I mean, I grew up in Northern California. I've been able to drive a handful of the different roads around here and get a good feel for the land. And when I typically think about a good group drive, I'm thinking about there's got to be at least a good amount of road that's going to be fun, right? And fun for us is twisty, not too much traffic. I definitely don't want to be driving a road that's too broken up, too many potholes, things like that, right? I'm thinking good pavement, twisty, good scenery, right? That's got to be
For
a part
sure.
of it for sure. I mean, there's coastline, there's mountains, there's forest, there's all these cool things that we can add to that element. But also, like, a good route, in my mind, has a good destination. Because, yes, we're going to be driving. Yes, we're going to be enjoying the roads. We're going to be enjoying each other's company. But there needs to be good stopping points, right? There needs to be good pull off areas. And there needs to be a good destination. And that good destination might need to have, I don't know, food. Mainly, I'm more thinking about a place that's going to be able to accommodate multiple vehicles. I think bad driving plans is when you have maybe 4 to 8 cars and you're stopping in locations where not everyone can stop in the same location. That usually puts a downer on the day, that there's not that enough parking space or entryways for low vehicles to get into. All things that might seem like small details but can change a fun afternoon into a stressful and chaotic one.
It sort of changes the inclusivity of your activity if you can't all be there together. If you have a big group and you go out to eat and you wind up being spread out across multiple tables, like it doesn't feel like you're all one group anymore. You kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
fragment into these little subgroups. So I think that's a really important point, having a destination or places you're going to go along the way that can accommodate the size of your group, right? And you don't need to have 50 cars in a group drive for it to be meaningful. A group of 3 or 4 or 5 people can go out and have just as good a time, maybe even better. And it makes it a lot easier to accommodate that number of cars if you're just going to pull off for gas, for food, for pictures, for scenic opportunities, whatever those happen to be, just because you see something cool along the way. There's also consideration for when you do these things, right? Days of the week, times of the day, times of the year. If the day that you choose to do your route would otherwise be excellent, but it happens to be the big bicycle hill climb, and you're going to be encountering hundreds and hundreds of bicyclists on this road that you decided you were going to use for a fun drive, you're probably not going to have a great time of it. Not every drive has to be fast. Let's also make that clear. The reason twisty roads, curvy roads, roads that are pretty to look at are great for these drives is not because you hit some maximum speed. It's because you get to use a lot of the dynamics of your car. And we've talked about that, sort of using 80% of your car is much more interesting than only being able to use the 20 or 30% of your car that maybe you do on your normal drive. And we want to be able to do that in a safe way, in sort of a conducive way to being good stewards out on the road, being good citizens out on the road, not making a lot of trouble for other people, doing things in a way that we can go back and feel good about and do them again. There's also sort of hazards to consider. Like if you're going to do a drive, let's say you choose to start really early in the day before the light is even up so that you can take advantage of a cool sunrise somewhere. Well, what's it going to be like out at that time of day? What's it going to be like with that level of visibility? Is there wildlife to consider? Are there places that you're not going to be able to have good visibility where there are hazards that you'll encounter? All of those are things to consider. And then there's just the dynamics that you can't really control for, and you can plan as well as you can, but you always have to consider weather and unplanned things that could occur out along your road, construction or vehicles that are disabled or things like that. So having a sense of where you're going to go, I think one of the best things you can do is do a scouting run, do a pre-drive, actually drive the route with maybe one or two people just to get a sense of what it is that you'll encounter. It doesn't have to be exactly the same time. Obviously, if you're doing it in advance, you're not going to be at the exact same time as when you're doing this drive. But a time that's representative or emblematic of when you're hoping to do this group drive gives you insight into things that you might not be able to anticipate. You might not be able to derive from looking at photos, looking at maps, just trying to do the best you can to plan. You really need to go and get eyes on the place where you're wanting to go and the nature of it to be able to plan accordingly for doing that kind of drive. Ultimately, once you've sort of socialized and gotten a sense of what this thing is going to look like, then you can get your group together and plan for the kind of drive that you want to do.
Now, would you recommend that that's the best thing to do is know the route first? I mean, what if you're in a new area, you're trying to put something together, new routes, new roads? Would you look into maybe just looking on a map to see if like, hey, this might be a cool route? Or would you always recommend like, hey, at least give it like one test run? That way you're not roping, 5 of your friends into a nightmare road that you didn't know about.
A test run is advised if you could at all do it. I've been on drives where we're going to go somewhere, drive up a mountain, and nobody had thought or had done this pre-planning to understand that there was actually part of the road that was closed because of winter weather, right? You don't want to take a group of people up a mountain and then get stuck where you can't go any further and it's hard to turn around and the conditions of the road make it hard to be out there, and that's just a bad time for everybody. But there is part of this that is a sense of discovery, like you're going out just to see the world. So sometimes looking at a map and trying to find the twisty, curvy-looking roads that appear to be good for driving. Ideally, there maybe be like a Google Street View or a way you can get a visual of what that road looks like to say, oh, this is cool. These twisties go through this tree-covered canopy area. They open up to a section. Maybe there's a straightaway following a bunch of turns so that you can actually open the car up a little bit in a safe way where you have visibility and not traffic or pedestrians or residential areas that you'd want to be driving through. There's also ways to sort of crowdsource this. There's a number of apps that exist or websites out there that you can look at to give you a sense of what's a good drive in this area. And it's a matter of doing a little exploration and being willing to try new things. I think ultimately that leads you to finding a cool drive. I mean, even if you just go search online for find cool drives near me, you're almost guaranteed that you're going to find some people out there chatting about, on whatever platform it is, places that they like to take their cars, places where they've gone for a drive and maybe they advise not to go on this drive again. Getting whatever intelligence you can in advance only prepares you, only helps you. You can never guarantee a good time, but helps you anticipate things that might, take away parts of that experience being so good to try to, set yourself up for success.
Yeah, I would ensure that whenever you search for these things to make sure that it's keywords of if you're a car enthusiast versus just a general person wanting to go on a scenic drive. The reason why I bring this up is because one Christmas many years ago, my dad got me a book that was like, I don't know, it was the 50 or 100 best drives in America, right? And then it was broken down by state, and you go to different chapters in different states. And so we looked into California. We're like, oh, let's look at like California drives. Like, let's see what's local of like, if these are renowned as the best roads to drive, let's go check them out. We ended up going on a road trip, and the road that we picked, which we knew nothing about and had done no other research other than this book that we had gotten, and it was called The Lost Coast in Northern California. Now, if you look up the Lost Coast, there's a lot of things that would deter you from driving this road because it's this pretty gnarly loop that goes out to the California coastline, and it's kind of one way in, one way out. And there's nothing out there, and it's super secluded. And us looking at this of like the Lost Coast, there's nothing out there, it's vacant. We're like, rad. That means we can drive fast and have a good time, and there's going to be no distractions.
Right.
What we didn't realize is Lost Coast meant even the county who is in charge of maintaining the roads has also forgotten about this road in this area. And there was a good percentage of it that was still dirt and gravel. And we're in my 1997 M3, not a good vehicle to be going overlanding onto this lost coast. And also there's a lot of things of like bad things that happen out there because it's one way in, one way out. And if you go at wrong times during the day, I mean, bad things can happen because there's no cell service. There's nothing out there. You run into a stranger. Who knows what's going to happen? Anyway, we learned very quickly that this book was absolutely worthless. I never read another chapter or took another recommendation because just because it's a scenic road and it's something that's beautiful and gorgeous and this, that, the other, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good driver's road. And like we're talking about, there's some of those additional elements of, gas stations are maybe an important thing to make sure that you have rest stops and things like that, but also that the roads are in a good condition, that they're suitable to driving in a spirited and safe manner. So talking about some of those resources, some of those apps that you're talking about, are there certain ones that you can recommend that are like, hey, these are for enthusiasts and they're going to let you know, like, this is a really good road to drive, or like this has big traffic, or this one has, kind of crappy road surface? Is there any apps that you can think of that like are more specific to that?
They're all a little hit or miss, to be honest. Like at the end of it, the apps that exist out there are route planning apps. They're intended to give you the directions that you need to go on a map, to maybe give you some information to organize a group, rules, things like that you're going to share among a group. It's hard for them to keep up to date with hazards, the dynamics of a drive, because that stuff changes all the time. So you really need to do sort of like I'll say like a cross correlation of find an app to help plan your route and maybe use that as a common thing to consistently have among your group as the mapping tool that we're going to use. For example, where you can download maps if you're outside of mobile phone coverage to make sure that your maps remain accurate while you're perhaps in an off the beaten path kind of place. But there are apps that help you with that kind of stuff. And if you look at weather reports and road condition reports, combined with those, I think you can get kind of where you need to be. Some of the ones that I came across, there's a couple of apps. There's one called URR. There's another one called JoinR, like Joiner, Road and Rally, Road Trippers. Kind of a cool one I found was called Curvature, where it's based on an algorithm that looks for the actual curvature of roads in an area. And again, here you need to be careful because just because a road is twisty doesn't mean that it's really suitable for a road rally. But it gives you insight to places that maybe are worth exploring for potential road rallies, down the road. No pun intended. But you want to find out, is this road all gravel? Is it not well paved? It's kind of annoying to be in a road rally where you're not the front car and like the entire time you're out there, all you're doing is getting like rock chips all over the front of your car because this road is so poorly maintained and every car just kicks up gravel all behind it. And so that makes for a lot more of a spaced out group, right? You can't be kind of close to each other because the rocks and gravel and stuff coming off of the car ahead of you is actually pummeling the front of your car. And you can't be too precious and worried about all of those things, but you certainly don't want to be coming back from this drive and feeling like your car was harmed as a result of the road that you chose.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think we're against normal wear and tear of using your car. Like, that's way better of getting out on the road and actually running it than it just always being in the garage.
Totally.
But yeah, to your point, like, it doesn't need to be unnecessary damage. Like, if we're doing or made a stupid decision and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'm getting more rock chips than I needed to, then yeah, absolutely. Like, we don't need to be putting ourselves in a true rally situation driving on some dirt roads.
Yeah, we want to stay on the pavement. That's what we're going to focus this conversation about. Maybe we'll talk about road rallying, like off-road checkpoint driving. That's a different conversation we can have another time. There's a few other apps. There's something called My Scenic Drives that looks pretty good. There's a lot of individuals that put out their website or their information, their blog post, whatever, about, oh, this is a cool set of places to go. One that I know of from back up in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, there's a site called Dan's Drives. There's a fellow I know who put together this great website with information about a few fun scenic drives, and they would talk about things like where are the places to stop, what are the destinations along the way, how do we rate this drive? Is this something that you should consider depending on the weather? Something else we didn't talk about is duration. How long do you want to be out there on the road? And something to consider is, the comfort and well-being of all of your attendees. And all of this is in addition to just, using your normal map apps. But if you're going to plot a route and it says from here to your destination takes 6 hours, realize that's a continuous drive. That's without stops. So you can include all of your waypoints and intended stops along the way, but somebody's going to need to use the bathroom, right? The capacity of bladders is finite, and you do want people hydrating and not being like all, kind of loopy and hangry and dehydrated all day. You need to find places you can stop along the way where people can grab a bite to eat or grab a drink or use the bathroom or get gas. You don't want to be driving a long distance to a remote place and not have any facilities along the way if somebody needs to pull over, check something that maybe went wrong with their car, or just even to refuel. So those are all important things to consider. Ultimately, you want to be comfortable. And I know that's something that sometimes we will subvert for the benefit and pleasure of being in a fun car, and being out on a fun drive is something that's maybe a little bit more harsh than the car you would use for your daily commute. But that said, if you're going for something that's multiple hours, you're going to want to be comfortable. You have to think about the weather and the light outside. You need to think about visibility. You need to think about how long do you feel like sitting in your vehicle without stopping to get out. And all the different people in your group have potentially different needs, and to be able to accommodate more than just your own specific needs when you do a drive like that. That's just good etiquette, a good way to be part of a group. But ultimately, it's important to your success as a drive to be thinking about those things. And then recognize when you plot your route out to your destination or destinations, that's one way. You're going to need to get back. And what do you want the nature of the drive back to be? Are people going to be tired? Is it the end of a long day? Do you want the route back to be as challenging and grueling as the route out to your location? Is there some other way that you can go on the way back that lets you see something different than what you saw on the way out? Those are all aspects of considering the amount of time you're going to be out, what time of day that you drive, the total duration, and how to maximize for the best experience of everybody who's participating in this thing.
I think that's a thing that I always forget about when I go out on drives is maybe having a little bit more patience to stop and not continuously drive I want to get to that final destination, and if I've found a big opening or a gap that I've gotten around some slower traffic, like I want to keep that. And I feel like that's like the racer mentality in me of like, I'm in the lead. I don't want to give up the lead and come into the pits. But every once in a while, you need to stop, pull off to the side, enjoy the process of getting to that final destination. It's not all about just driving fast the entire way there, right? Mix it up. Get out. I like the idea of finding scenic places to stop. Maybe a cool old gas station, something like that, or a cool old deli, right? Find places where when you pull off, you're getting food, using the restroom, getting fuel. There's also cool areas to be able to take photos and media. I mean, we all love to have those memories to remember the day or the afternoon that we got to go out and enjoy our cars with our friends. And so having picturesque stops always helps the situation too, rather than just kind of your generic, normal, run-of-the-mill urban zones. Find some like cool stuff, off the beaten path, areas that you can take photos, all that cool stuff. Just always adds to the experience.
We're a little spoiled here in California because there are so many good places to drive and scenic routes along the way. There are even roads that are designated as scenic routes where you'll just see a sign and you're in for something good coming up ahead. And back to your point about, not taking a racer mentality to this. We're not out there to go as fast as possible to get from point A to point B in the minimum amount of time. This is not the cannonball run. This is not a timed gumball rally, right? What we're doing here is out there enjoying the driving itself, which isn't always to be done at maximum speed.
Now, with these routes and having a larger group of people, I would assume that it's kind of difficult to keep everyone on the same page once you're on the road, right? You can do a lot to say, hey, this is our predetermined route. This is where we're going to go. Here's the destinations. But while the convoy, if we can call it that, while the group of cars is moving, what are some things that you can do to help keep that level or line of communication active?
So yeah, I think just like any group dynamic, communication is key, right? To be able to talk to the other people in the group, communicate to them. Ultimately, during the activity, it's kind of fun to be able to talk too, and there's ways to be able to do that. So the first and foremost thing is, we were talking about those apps. Similar to that, have there be an agreed upon sort of communications protocol and mechanism. A lot of groups use radios for this because sometimes if you're going out to drive in an underpopulated area, somewhere where there are twisties, out to the coastline, up in a mountain, there's not always great coverage for Wi-Fi or mobile service. So to be able to communicate among the group, even in a lack of cell phone coverage, is pretty important, especially if there's an emergency. Another thing to consider about your communication is there's something different to be seen whether you're up at the front of the pack or at the rear of the pack if you're in a large enough group of cars. If it's just two cars, the front and the back of the pack are pretty compressed. But if you're in a group of 10 or 20 or 30 cars, what's happening up front, what's happening in the rear of that group are going to be different just by the nature of how roads are and the dynamics of cars all driving together in a line. So having there be the ability of the people who are in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack to know about what's coming up later on in their drive, but the people who are at the head of that pack of cars or that group of cars are already experiencing is really useful. So designating for the front driver of your group as a spotter to be able to be in a position to see what's coming out ahead of the rest of that group and to be able to communicate that back to other members of the group really changes the dynamic of the drive from something which is really arbitrary and random and you catch as catch can to now something that's a little bit more planned out and you can take advantage of the changes in dynamics or conditions out on the road. Your spotter out front say, hey, guess what? There's a big group of motorcyclists going by here and we're going to be stuck for a little while. So we're going to come to a stop and everybody just hang out. Or there's a hazard here coming up in the road. There's construction going on. All of you with lower vehicles where your ground clearance is somehow is likely for you to scrape or bottom out, you want to be aware of this dip that's coming up in the road that the spotter out front is able to see. And it also enables you to increase your velocity. If you're all driving together and have clear communication about what's coming up, even the things that you can't yet see, that means you can bring a little bit more speed into those areas versus a completely blind area where you have no idea if there's a bicyclist around this blind curve or there's water across the road in an unexpected place coming up. That leads to bad outcomes if you can't anticipate. So having a spotter who can then communicate back to the rest of the group and having that be a designated role for that person to play, for somebody who wants to play that role, who's in a vehicle that's appropriate to get out ahead of that group and be able to traverse the conditions maybe in a smoother way than the rest of the group, can be pretty essential and can really turn a moderately okay drive where we had to deal with some problems into an excellent drive. We were able to anticipate what was coming up ahead, maybe keep our foot in it a little longer and not deal with the outcomes of bad things that we just could have seen if we would have planned a little differently.
Yeah, I think having a scout or someone out there in front of the group is something that can really add, right? If someone's willing to do it, because being the first car through, you're the one that's going to be facing all of these new, unforeseen variables, police, obstacles, all that sort of stuff. But if you can have a friend that's like, hey, I'm down, I'm into it, like maybe I got a little bit better radar detectors or whatever countermeasures than anyone else, I'll go out in front, be able to relay any information, or, if there's a cop hiding in a certain location, stuff like that, that can just ensure the rest of the group to have a lot more fun. But having that scout in the front as well as communication in the rear, just in case anyone slows up too, right? I mean, that's kind of the spotter in the rear's job, is in case anyone needs to pull over unexpectedly, whether that's a bathroom break or a flat tire or mechanical issue, something like that. The person in the rear can ensure it's like, hey, I'm the caboose, I'm the last guy, so if anyone falls back, they can be able to hang out with them. And if you really want to go above and beyond for your final car or your chase car, right, the guy in the very, very back, you can make sure to put some extra supplies, tools, whatever in that vehicle, just in case anyone has any sort of roadside issue with their car. Maybe they got a little extra quart of oil or a jack or a torque wrench or something like that to make sure that, yeah, if someone has a bad day or an incident with their vehicle, it's not the end of the rally or it's not the end of the trip for them, and you've been able to pre-plan for those things and keep everything rolling smooth.
Yeah, it's a great idea to be covered on both the front and the back of the pack. A lot of times what we'll do is if we have a spotter out front and somebody in the back who's willing to play that role, we'll bring a photographer or somebody whose job it is to document this drive along the way and put them either up front or at the back of the pack so that they can see this thing before the rest of the group that they said, hey, this would be a really great spot for us to pull over and maybe take a group picture before the rest of the group has driven by it and you have to find a place to turn around and it's inconvenient, you can make those sort of judgment decisions along the way and have good communication among the group. And then exactly to your point, having that chase car, the car that's in the back, that's maybe the one that's most well supplied, enables you to keep the group together. And it's kind of a drag if you're in a big group of cars and the pack starts to spread out enough that now you're no longer one group. It's back to that you went as a group to the restaurant and now nobody gets to sit together anymore because you're spread out so much over this large area.
Yeah, and I would say, like you're talking about, the more that you can pre-plan and have things decided before you go out on the drive, the smoother everything's going to be. The more that you can start trying to resolve problems that may potentially occur, the better suited you're going to be able to resolve them quickly. So it's thinking about stuff like that of, hey, what if people get in between our cars, or what is the solution? What is the protocol in that sort of situation? Now, as the organizer or the leader of the event, of the drive, making sure that you have answers to all of those questions. So when it happens, it's, hey, this is what we do, this is how we resolve this, and then we can get back along our way, rather than being, one person might come up with their own solution versus the other group is making a decision on their own and not everyone's on that same page. So the clearer you can be with all of these potential bottlenecks within your drive, with that group in the very beginning, the more you can make sure that everyone's on the same page, and the more that you can ensure that everyone's going to have a safe and fun time. Now, of course, let's talk a little bit about safety, because there's a lot of outside variables, right? Some of those other vehicles that can get involved in your group, but then also just the innate nature of driving in a group and the energy that can happen and bouncing off driver to driver, and just the potential risk of safety in regards to yourself driving your vehicle, just trying to have a fun time. So, I mean, how would you control that with a group of people? Because things can kind of get out of hand quickly. Just like I'm talking about, that energy can start bouncing off people. Maybe they start to try to show off or make decisions that aren't the best for the group.
We've all been in those groups where there's somebody who does something that's marginal, sort of behavior-wise, and that encourages other people to do that thing that's also marginal. And before long, you're all doing stuff that's going to get you in trouble that you wouldn't have done individually otherwise, but now there's this sort of group mindset. So establishing sort of a culture, a norm, a set of expectations or goals, guidelines, we can call them rules. That sounds a little hard and fast, but ultimately that's what we're talking about. Agreeing together how we're going to conduct ourselves, how we're going to deal with things, what we're going to do together, what we're not going to do together, to keep this a safe thing that we could all repeat and come back from. We all want to live to drive another day. Don't be out there acting like the person who isn't out there to live to drive another day and taking risks that other people just aren't willing to take. So I think setting a few guidelines around these things to be able to enable a drive where you come back having no incidents, right? That means no cars wrecking, no cars having an accident, no cars having mechanical failures as a result of things that they were doing that could have been anticipated. That is not getting pulled over by the police. That is not being held up by a bunch of angry residents in an area where they're not used to having a bunch of loud, fast cars coming through, getting annoyed and coming out with the pitchforks and torches because you're driving in this area where cars usually don't do that. So all of those things are important to sort of iron out in advance and or have an agreement about how you're going to deal with them. For me, one of the really important rules is, and this sounds really basic and fundamental, but you'd be surprised, don't cross the double yellow line. Now, we all know that the road rules, wherever you live, there's probably regulations that say double lines are not to be crossed, whether they're double whites or double yellows. That's just the signal we have on the roads in the U.S. that tell us that's something that we're not supposed to do. But we've all been in those conditions where, there's nobody around and I don't see any other traffic and there's a double yellow here, and it could have been a dashed line. It could have been, this is safe for us to pass other cars if the conditions allow for that. There just isn't that. It's a double yellow here. And so now what do you do? In the group drives that I've done, we've just set a hard and fast rule, which is double lines aren't to be crossed, right? There's kind of a funny thing people sometimes say is keep it between the mustard and the mayo, right? Where the mustard are your yellow lines going through the double yellow lines going through the center of the road. And the mayo is that what they call the fog line, or the single solid white line that's the barrier on the outside of the road that sort of determines the boundary of the road surface. And so keeping it in your lane is what we're talking about. And then on the flip side of that is, what do you do if people aren't following those rules? How do you enforce without feeling like you're the police or you're the military, or being heavy to your friends to say like, hey, you did something that we agreed we weren't going to do, and that violates our social contract together? It potentially puts people at risk. So I think that's a really important thing to get out of the way ahead of your drive, is establish the guidelines, the safety parameters, the sort of rules of the road that you're going to all agree to follow or not.
Yeah, there needs to be safety rules implemented. I think the hardest thing of whenever you're putting on a group drive or whatever is when someone goes against clearly stated rules, and you have to have that conversation, right? And because if someone breaks the rules and you don't have a conversation to kind of put that out there that, hey, we don't like that sort of behavior or whatever it is, other people might feel like they can ignore or not have to abide by those rules either. And I think it's really important to set a precedent. You don't have to be, anything aggressive or egregious when having a conversation with someone, but just making sure it's like, hey, this is how we want to present ourselves. We want to be able to come back and do more of these drives and, respect the communities. I think that's a big thing of, especially here in Northern California, that I've always felt even when I was younger and a teenager going out for these drives was, there's sections of the road that are out there in kind of the middle of nowhere, and the speed limit might be 50 or 55 miles an hour, and you might go a little bit above that because there's not much out there. There's not other cars, there's not houses or anything like that. But when you come up on those small communities that do exist out there, right, I always respected those speed limits. Whenever the speed limit came down below 55 and I'm like, hey, I'm coming up to a neighborhood or a town or the main street, whatever it is, and the speed limit starts dropping 45, 35, maybe even 25 miles an hour, go the speed limit, right? At that point, just go the speed limit, right? You had your fun. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You get to rip it, right? You get to go a little bit faster, going fast through the corners. Whenever you come up to a town, be respectful of the people. And I think that they really respect that too. Like these communities that are out there on the coastline, in the mountains, they know people like to drive those roads, but as long as you respect where they are, their houses, their community, whatever it is, and be safe in those areas, they're like, yeah, go have your fun out in the mountains, keep it for the twisty fun stuff. And that's always been a rule that I've held of, I respect these roads, I love these roads, and I want to respect the communities that are in this area, right? And have that mutual respect and making sure that everyone has a good day, that I have a good day behind the wheel, enjoying some roads, and also those people have and continue to have a good day, that I'm not coming into their community and just tearing stuff up.
That's a way to be a good driver. And we're not necessarily talking about your technique at 10/10 what you do on the racetrack. We're talking about being a good member of society, being a good citizen. You're going to be out there on the roads. The roads are a common good. They're out there paved for all of us to use. We don't necessarily pay for all of those roads. Sure, there's taxes and tolls and things, but those roads are part of the local commons, right? We're all using these things, and we have to take care of them and do them in such a way so that we don't ruin it for other people. Driving through those communities, yeah, that's the way to get to, from, or through the places that we want to drive. And we have to respect the fact that there are people living there. We certainly don't want there to be any loss of life or injury or harm done as a result of our desire to go out and have a good time. There's too much to live for. There's too many good things out there to do that we can be positive about without making it hard on other people. So keep that in mind. You're part of a system. You're part of this community or this area where you're driving through. Maybe it's not your home. So be thoughtful about the fact that what if it was your home? How would you feel about it?
And it's always just measuring this like risk versus reward equation. It's the same equation we use when we're out at the racetrack, right? Risk versus reward. I want to have a good time. And if I take an unnecessary risk, I may not have a good time. And it's the same thing out on the public roads. I think we're all smart enough to recognize there's certain areas where there's not a lot of people, good road conditions, good visibility, where you can take a little bit of an extra risk, go above the speed limit in a safe and respectful manner. And then there's areas where you need to obey the speed limits and stick to it. And there's more risk than reward, right? Going through a town or community, double the speed limit. Is that really fun, right? Like, no, it's not, right? It's a straight line. It's not even a part of like the fun bit of road. And that's where that trade-off happens of like, okay, I'm going to be very respectful here, and once I get out of this area, getting back to the fun, and also at the end of the day, right, is always making sure you have fun. And that's that risk reward equation of there's nothing to prove. You're not trying to show off. Roger Penske isn't going to meet you out on some random back road and be like, hey man, you're really wheeling that GT3, like, what are you doing next season? You want to come run one of my prototypes? No, of course not, right? Like, the main thing is making sure that we can ensure that we come back safe and we had a good time. So it's having fun, it's exercising our cars, but it's not for pushing limits. I mean, the two of us, we get it, right? You go to the track, you want to push your limits, you want to put it on the edge, you want to, put your car in a potential situation that you might lose control or maintain control, right? That adrenaline rush that we get of being on the edge of a car's capability. It's not for the street, right? That there's just no need to get that out of on the street, and not to mention the mixed conditions, and you never know what's around the next corner, and driving at that 70 to 80%, leaving a little bit on the table at all times, because you might come around a blind bend and all of a sudden there's a bicyclist right in the middle of your road, and it's like, if you smoke him, like, that's on you, right? That's not his fault for being there. We can all talk about how much we hate bicyclists on our roadways because it ruins our driving roads. But he has a right to be there, right? At the end of the day, like, even if we don't like that he's there, he's still allowed to be there. And it's our responsibility to make sure that he makes it home safe too. And so it's all a risk reward equation, and just have fun out there. Like, don't take it too seriously. Don't try to show off. Whoever's trying to set like a personal best on a stretch of public road is insane, in my opinion.
You're doing it wrong if that's your goal, right? This is about a shared experience among a group of people out there to have a good time. And if you're trying to prove limits, if you're trying to prove that you can do something better than other people, this isn't the right activity. There's a way to get that stuff out of your system. It's driving your car at a racetrack, competing with other people within their set of rules and regulations, because if you don't follow those, you won't be allowed to go there for very long either.
Yeah.
And we're out on the public roads that weren't designed for you to use them like a racetrack. The dynamics of them, the people out there living their lives every day aren't expecting those things. And we're never going to completely eliminate risk. Risk exists, but what we could do is manage it. We can mitigate it. We can be careful about the chances we take so that in the end, the result of those things is a good time and a positive experience, and not a bunch of accidents or tickets or stories that we have to go tell or pictures that get circulated around the internet of people who made bad decisions. You don't want to be that girl or that guy.
Now, okay, we talked about a lot of safety and the downsides that could potentially happen. Let's finish on a positive note here. What are some of the additional elements that you can add to your drives or your rallies that add that last little bit of fun? What are some other things that you can do besides picking a good route, getting a good group of people together? What are some of those final elements that can really take your drive for something that's a good afternoon to a great afternoon?
One of the things I really like is when you have that group photographer, videographer, somebody along or somebody's along whose jobs it is to document the experience, to capture during that drive the things that maybe we're all too busy driving to do. But it would be really amazing if, oh, wow, we could have gotten a shot of all these 10 of the same car all in this really special place. Or, wow, there was that time where the clouds parted and the rainbow was shining through, and it was just an amazing scene, and I wish I would have had my camera handy, and I don't want to fumble with my phone while we're doing this drive. That's something we agreed we weren't going to do. We were going to have the photographer worry about that stuff, and at the end, they can share all those photos, and we get the benefit of pictures that we personally couldn't take during that journey because there was somebody else who was out there doing that or that video. I even know groups that have done these drives, maybe a multi-day sort of epic journey destination kind of thing, where they'll produce a photo book at the end of the drive, where there's this memento that you can buy or have, depending on the structure of how you've made this event, that you can take away and have there be tangible memories from that day, pictures, video, scrapbook, collected things that help you remember that time you went and did that drive and had a good time and you were with your group of friends, and you can go back and reflect on what cars there were and where it was that you stopped and what that day or those days were like. And those are the kind of things that make these experiences more tangible and memorable after the fact so that you can share them with other people. So keep those things in mind. It's worth a little bit of planning. It's not overhead, right? It's a way to make the experience a little bit more special and something you can take away from it, in that it's not just like you were commuting from point A to point B, but the destination was the journey itself.
Well, this has been a lovely conversation getting into road rallies, planning trips, group drives with your buddies. I think we covered a lot of great topics, and it's making me excited to get back out there on the roadways and enjoying cars as they're intended to be, which is driven and going out on adventures. So thanks for the conversation, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Silas.
We'll see you out there on the roadways.
Thanks for listening. This has been Cold Start.